Please, whatever you do, don't make these mistakes when starting your seeds. Welcome back to Better Terra. I'm Josh, and today we're going to talk about one of the most crucial parts of having a successful garden: seed starting. Seedlings are the foundation of any successful garden, but it's easy to make mistakes along the way. In this episode, we'll talk about mistakes that I've learned from and some steps to avoid them. I have 8 areas where common mistakes are made, and if you hold out to the end, I'll share a tip with you that'll make all the difference. If you've made a mistake when starting seeds, go ahead and click that like button and let us know that we're all not alone. If you have anything specific that you want to talk about, leave us a comment below. First, in the long list of mistakes that I've made, let's talk about watering. Watering is probably one of the most common mistakes that folks make, because you can overwater and you can underwater. There's a happy medium in there between not enough and too much. Too much is usually the most detrimental. Too little, you see signs early: wilting, maybe a little a yellowing of the leaves. Add some water and things normally bounce back. But if you overwater, then you're promoting funguses and bacteria and molds and all kinds of nasty stuff to grow, because it's a very, very wet environment for those things to thrive. And something that your seedling will not survive from is a disease called damping off. And that's when, right at the very base of the seedling where it meets the soil, your stem will just wither to nothing and your seedling will fall over. And there's no recovering from that problem. Like I said, underwatering, you'll see wilting first for sure. If it gets too bad, you might see some yellowing of the leaves. Hopefully they don't turn brown and start to get crispy. But if you can catch it when they're starting to wither, starting to look a little limp, add water, everything should recover. Overwatering is one of the worst things that you can do. It promotes root rot, the dampening off like I spoke about, and allowing molds and bacteria and things like that to grow on your soil. I've learned in my watering practices that when the seedlings are this size, that using a small watering can and watering right on top of the soil is the best method. Before the seedling starts to germinate and break the top of the soil, I use a spray bottle and just spray the top of the soil, because sometimes the turbulence pouring from a watering can can disturb the soil and swirl up the seed, and the seed might even float to the surface. So I like the squirt bottle until I see anything above the surface, and then I use the watering can. And then when they get bigger like this and it's time to move out to the greenhouse, then I use a bottom watering method where I fill a tray with water and let them sit and absorb the water. But that way the roots tend to pull down towards the bottom of the container. The next area we'll talk about is light. And this is the light normally when you're in your germination area, like downstairs at the germination station, where I have pretty intense lights right on top of the soil before germination and right above the foliage as it's growing. If I were to attempt to start my seeds out here, one, it's still pretty chilly, but two, the intensity of the light might not be enough, and you'll tend to get really leggy seedlings. And I'll show a screenshot here where you have a very thin, long stalk, and then your first seed leaves are at the top of that very skinny stem. So we want to avoid that. So intense lights as close to the plant or as close to the soil before germination as you can get. If you have a germination area with lights, and if you aren't able to lower your lights to the top of the soil, then you need to have very intense lights so the foliage won't stretch, won't reach towards the light. Now, we don't want to get too intense, because usually intense lights equal a lot of heat, and they can actually burn and crispen your leaves. So there's a happy medium in there somewhere. If you have lights, you're able to lower them right down on top of the foliage, but you're having very slow growth, small leaves, then chances are your light isn't intense enough. We've used many different kinds of lights. We've had leggy plants, we've had stunted growth, we've burnt plants. Actually, one or two of the eggplants have some burn spots because they grew incredibly fast. And with the lights, we'll go right into the next area, which is talking about warmth in your germination area. Warmth is pretty important, in my opinion, during germination. That's why I have the seed mats for setting the soil on top of, so it maintains a good even temperature. I normally aim for about 75 to 80 degrees, and germination tends to take off like crazy in those temperatures. The right amount of water and the right temperature, and the seeds will just take off. So this is another area though where too warm and too wet can promote growth of things that you don't want, molds and pests and funguses. So with your warmth, you still want air flow. So if you can have a small fan circulating the air around your grow area, it's very important. You also don't want your area to be too warm. Again, it might crispen the leaves, just like we were talking about from the lights. If it's too warm, it'll make things dry out, crisp your leaves up. You just don't want that. Maintain a nice happy warmth, and your plants and your seeds will love you for it. The fourth area of common mistakes, in my opinion, is soil choice. And whenever I say soil, I really mean a planting medium. Seed starting doesn't need a soil that has any nutrient in it. The nutrient that the seed needs to create the seedling is in the seed already. So an inert medium, like coconut coir or peat moss with some perlite or vermiculite in with it, is all you need for seed starting. Those inert properties don't normally harbor any pests or funguses or things like that. But I will take pause and say, I've made my own seed starting mix before out of peat moss and coconut coir that I bought in bulk, added vermiculite, added perlite, and was very successful in starting seeds, but also losing some seeds because there was molds, bacteria, and we had an infestation of fungus gnats that were hatched out of that seed starting DIY mix. And they went to every plant in the house, and it took us almost all season to get rid of those. But now I tend to lean to a good quality, pre-made, bagged seed starting mix. I've shared it on the channel before. I like a mix from a company called Fertilome. I'll try to find a link and put it down below. But it's coconut coir based. It works really good. I haven't had any molds or funguses grow along with my seeds. But then the soil choice when it comes to transplanting, I have a little bit here in a bucket. Now this is a potting mix that I made last year from compost and perlite and some vermiculite. It's got some sand in it. This works really well. And whenever it's time for you to transplant your seedlings, like when it comes to the greenhouse, the risk of those funguses or bacterias that are in the soil are less harmful to a mature seedling than a brand new germinating seed. Before we move on to number 5, I'll ask if you're learning anything, if you like what you hear, if I'm making you laugh a little bit maybe because I'm out here going over mistakes that I've made, click that like button and let us know. The 5th group of common mistakes I'll say is feeding. Usually feeding a seedling is started too soon. Adding some sort of nutrient to your watering before the seedling is really ready for it. And for me, I don't start feeding my seedlings until they're about this size. They've already gone past the the small seed leaves, and then they have about 3, we're almost on to 4 here, sets of mature true leaves. So the third set is usually my key. It's time to start adding some nutrient to my watering schedule. And now that everything is moving out to the greenhouse, the first watering, I'm going to hold off on nutrient because I don't want to shock anything. But maybe in the second day, then I'll start a low number nutrient to my watering. If you wait too long to feed till you have a mature plant, you're going to have a stunted growth plant because there's nothing for it to use, to feed on, to promote growth. Remember, you're in a sterile seed starting medium. There's no nutrient in there. The nutrient was the seed. It gets some nutrient from watering, but not the food that it needs for good photosynthesis, good foliage growth, good, healthy, strong root structures. So don't wait too long. This is maybe a few days past since we're looking at the 4th true leaf set here, but you know, this is an orange bell pepper. It's looking very healthy. Don't wait too long to feed. If you start seeing yellowing or stunted growth, it's definitely time to start feeding. Moving on to number 6, we'll talk about the timing of starting your seeds. And I've made, and probably still continue to make, some mistakes here. I feel like this year though I might have gotten it right with peppers and tomatoes and eggplants, but it is April the 9th. And we'll be planting here at the end of the month. We'll be moving these out to the garden. So about 4 weeks downstairs in the germination area, about 4 weeks in the greenhouse, and then it's usually time to move to the garden. So with my timing, last year is a good example. I started kind of everything at the same time. And by the time I was putting tomatoes in the garden, they were easily 18 inches tall, and some were bigger than that. I had them in the greenhouse. They were from the shelf all the way to the roof. They were gigantic. But the peppers and the eggplant are a little bit slower growing, so they were a little smaller. So this year is what I did for timing. So I wasn't planting or starting my seeds too early, so I had gigantic plants when it came time to go to the garden. I started peppers and eggplants a week earlier than tomatoes. This is a 4-week-old plant right here. My tomatoes that are still in the germination station are 3 weeks old, and they're getting to a healthy size now. They'll come out to the greenhouse probably next weekend. So if you start them too soon, you're going to have mature plants that are taking up all your space and may even outgrow the space that you have. So picking the right timing is important. I have a spreadsheet that I created. I just plug in the predicted last frost of my area, and it tells me all the dates, and then I can export it. It goes right to my Google Calendar. If you have any interest in me sharing that, let me know, and I'll put a link to it in the description. You know, another timing thing could be starting your seeds much too late. If you start your seeds too late, when it comes time to plant them in the garden, they'll be too small and maybe not even to the size where they'll be successful in the garden. And at that point, it might be a better idea to go to a local nursery and buy a transplant that's ready at that time. If you have small plants and you're already later in the season, might not be best to put those small plants in your garden. So don't start your seeds too late, because it kind of defeats the purpose of starting your seeds so you have a mature plant when it's time to go into the garden. The next one, I'll say, is pretty important. It's an easy one. It's just transplanting. It's moving your seedling from a smaller container to a bigger container as it needs. So I cheat this a little bit, and I start my seeds in a larger container instead of the small cells. So then I possibly don't have to transplant them twice in the process, just once. So I thought that these we're pretty good. Let's see if we can take a quick look here and see how far along we are. How far we are to needing to transplant these. This is a pepper. Okay, we've got good roots. They're not starting to circle the bottom yet. That's usually a good indicator when they start to circle the bottom. So we've probably got another week, maybe 2 with the peppers. I did transplant some of the eggplants for the previous video, and we're starting to get some root wrap on those. So I did put those in a little bit larger container. Maybe a little bit bigger would have been good too. But just like I did right there, you can check, look at your roots. If you see roots coming through the holes in the bottom of the container, good sign that it's time to transplant your seedlings up to a larger container. The 8th and final mistake topic is something called hardening off. That's when you take your seedling from your protected germination area and put it right into a harsh outdoor environment. It's been protected in a bubble, and then you're putting it in the harsh outdoor environment. We're getting a little bit of wind, it's getting a little harsh, direct sunlight. They're not ready for that kind of intensity. So hardening off is the practice of taking your seedlings and putting them outside for short periods of time in a protected area, maybe underneath a table on your deck or underneath a sunshade where they won't get direct sunlight, they're protected from the wind a little bit, but they can get some outdoor experience. And then over the course of a week, or maybe even 2, you expose them to longer and longer periods outside. Hardening off, in our case, we're coming from our protected area downstairs to a protected area outside in the greenhouse. So at night, the greenhouse will be closed up, the vent will close automatically, and they'll start to experience their first cycles of cooler temperatures in the night, but not direct, not wind, not any kind of frost situations. If it starts to get too cold, the heater is still in and turned on to keep it above 45. But in the daytime, with the door closed and the vent open, they're going to be protected from direct sun. All the sun coming through the panels is diffuse sun. Now, if the temperature begins to rise to a point, let's say above 90 degrees, have an exhaust fan that'll automatically kick on and pull cooler air through the vent and out through the bottom. And if that doesn't control it, then I'll come outside and do what I'm doing now and prop the door open until the evening when it needs to be closed. And then adding a fan inside for airflow, that'll happen this week. That'll begin to show the benefits of the airflow on the soil. So it's very important to harden off or acclimatize your seedlings before you put them right out in your garden space. Give them a slow transition. And if you've held out this long, you've made it to the bonus tip, the tip that will make all the difference. It's important. And I've kind of alluded to it, and I've tried to skip over some of those to now, but airflow. Airflow is very, very important, both in your germination area and in your greenhouse. Airflow in your germination area is important so that your soil doesn't stay too wet on the surface and promote the growth of the nasties that we've been talking about. The airflow during germination also causes the leaves and the stems to move, simulating that outdoor breezy environment. If they're not subjected to that, you can get very weak stems. So whenever they're subjected to constant twitching and moving, it makes the stem get more fibrous and add more structure. So that airflow in the germination area, very important. And that needs to continue into the greenhouse where they can still get that airflow stimulation, where they can still get the drying function over the soil of over the surface of the soil. So airflow from start to end is super important. Airflow is even important in the garden. If your tomato plants are super bushy and they allow moisture to hold in there, then you're gonna open yourself up to diseases like blight. So airflow around your tomatoes, around your peppers, super important. Don't plant your plants too close together. Prune them as necessary to allow the air to flow through and keep the bacteria and the nasties at bay. So airflow, airflow, airflow. If you leave with anything today, remember airflow. And that's it. Those are the mistakes that I've learned from that I hope that you don't make. If you have any questions or if you've learned your own mistakes, leave us comments. We love reading comments. We thank you for watching. We enjoy doing this. If you want us to do it more, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Go right down below and click that button. More subscribers let us know that the content we're putting out is worthwhile. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep on working toward a better Terra, one tip from a friend at a time.